Okay, so I'm going to be presenting academic language for history and social science. So what is academic language? Academic language refers to the specialized vocabulary, grammar, discourse, textual, and functional skills associated with academic instruction and mastery of academic materials and tasks. So what this basically means is that academic language is all the oral and written language used for academic purposes. So the EdTPA actually breaks down academic language into 4 main categories or language demands. So the first one is language functions. So these are all the active verbs within the learning outcomes, or the learning objectives. So for example, students will be able to explain the impact of minor political parties on elections. So that word explain would be your active verb and your language function, and the objective that students want. They want to be able to learn and explain the impact of minor political parties. So knowing how to explain. So vocabulary, number 2. Now this includes words, phrases, and symbols used within disciplines. So academic vocabulary there's general academic vocabulary, which would be words like compare, analyze, and now that is used across multiple disciplines. So you can compare in math, you can analyze in science. As for subject or content specific vocabulary, now this would be like words like constitution. You necessarily wouldn't see the word constitution in math. Number 3 is discourse. So this is how members of the discipline talk, write, and participate in knowledge construction using the structures of written and oral language. So this is any of the academic writing or academic conversations that are used in the classroom. So if you're having students like debate or anything, that would be considered the academic discourse. As for number 4, syntax, so this is the rules for organizing words or symbols together into phrases, clauses, sentences, or visual representations. So this is more English specific or writing specific. So how sentence structure is, so like past, present, and future tenses, things like that. My methods teacher doesn't necessarily use syntax in her lesson plans and focuses more on discourse. So why is academic language important? So mastery of language and synthetic features allows students full participation in academics by enabling them to put ideas together in a wide range of ways. So it's really important that students sophisticatedly know how to put things together. So in writing and in oral language or in conversation, that makes them sound, like I said, like more sophisticated. And it's really important that they focus on using language functions to communicate relationships between ideas. And they'll eventually start internalizing the patterns needed to express these. So learning how to explain something properly, or to describe something properly, or compare and contrast something. So it's really important to focus and grasp the whole concept of language functions and those active verbs. So what's the difference between academic language and informal language, or your everyday language? So in informal language, there's a lot more repetition of words. As for academic language, you use a lot more variety of words and more sophisticated vocabulary when you speak or when you write. As for an informal language, you also would speak with things like and or but when you start a sentence, and you wouldn't ever start a sentence in your writing with the word and or but. You would use also transition words usually when you're speaking, and also use them in your writing. Informal language also uses a lot of slang, so the word like dude, or the word saying like whatever, those would be considered slang. In academic language, it replaces slang with more accurate description. So instead of saying dude, you would say, hey, Steve. So also, informal language, you use that mainly in a casual social setting. So like at dinner with your family, or just at after school at practice with your friends. That's when informal language is most appropriate. But academic language is always appropriate in any academic or workplace setting. And lastly, informal language can vary greatly by ethnicity, gender, age, and region. So an example of it differing by region, I don't know if you're familiar with the slang word bloody that is used in the UK. So a lot of like British people use the word like it's bloody hot outside. And a lot of people would understand like that means they're trying to say it's really hot outside. So it doesn't always register across like all regions. So as for academic language, it registers for all. So it's by somebody saying it's very hot that everybody can understand that, yes, it's very hot. And now here's an example of just all the 4 language demands broken down into one example specifically for history and social science. So the language functions for it would be students will be able to compare the civilizations of the Incas and Aztecs. So the language function in this sentence is the word compare. So students need to be able to compare the difference between Incas and Aztecs. And some academic vocabulary or content-specific vocabulary would be origins, myths, Mesoamerica, conquistador. As for the discourse for this example, comparing primary or secondary sources would be considered the discourse. And other discourse examples for social science and history specific would be debates, like I said earlier, writing speeches, essays, analyzing newspaper tutorials, interpreting graphic representations like maps, or analyzing political cartoons. And for syntax for this example, I'm using longitude and latitude for location. Other examples of syntax may be sentence structure of the cause and effect, and claims and citations. And so yeah, that concludes my presentation on academic language for history and social science.